your best interest to disclose them to the vendor and have a patch available for your own networks as well. And what happens as more and more researchers, of course, discover certain vulnerabilities, the risk and the probability of these vulnerabilities being disclosed, of course, increases. So far, there wasn't really any good data about sort of the rediscovery rate of vulnerabilities, but in March, a paper by Trey Herr actually looked into this question a little bit more systematic. He had a number of different data sets to look at. One of the more recent ones was a database of Android vulnerabilities discovered between 2015 and 2016. And essentially he looked at how many of these vulnerabilities were reported multiple times. And well, he found 22% of vulnerabilities were rediscovered at least once within 2 months of their initial disclosure. Like I said, the paper looks at a number of additional older datasets as well, like OpenSSL and a couple other open source projects, of course, where you can check their bug database in order to see how often a particular vulnerability was reported before it was made public. What he found was that actually over the last few years, the rediscovery rate was increasing. Not really sure why, but I can see where, first of all, it has become more popular to report this vulnerabilities, in particular with bug bounties, of course, but then also some of the tools and methodologies to look for vulnerabilities have been more standardized. So there are really more people out there probably that are looking for the same type of vulnerability. Now, if you got hit by WannaCry last weekend, there's now a small sliver of hope that you could get your files back even if you don't pay the ransom. Given that WannaCry is pretty solid when it comes to the crypto and does not send any keys over the network, a simple decryption tool is probably not going to arrive anytime soon, but it turns out the key used to decrypt files may still be present in memory. Well, actually, not the key itself, but in order to create the user RSA key that is then used to encrypt the individual file encryption keys, WannaCry does use prime numbers that are not erased when the key is erased from memory. So by recovering these prime numbers, it's possible to recover the key, and the tool WannaKey that has now been released as open source will search memory for these prime numbers and use them to reconstruct the private key file. I wouldn't call this an ultimate fix or even sort of something that you should put a lot of hope into, but well, it's better than nothing, and if you're desperate, it's really your only choice at this point. Rebooting the system, of course, will clear out that memory and destroy these primes, so this only will work if you haven't rebooted your system yet. And well, today's Friday, so I got an Other Sans Technology Institute student with me here to talk about his research. This time we got David Brown. David Brown is going to talk with me a little bit about actually a blue team topic that is very aligned with my interest. He looked into using Splunk to hunt for compromise. So, Dave, can you introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is David Brown. I'm calling from Denver, Colorado, and I have an MBA and a CISSP. And currently, I'm pursuing a master's at the Sans Technology Institute. And yeah, the master's program has been both challenging and very rewarding.
In your paper, you're talking about how to use Splunk to find anomalies, to do some threat hunting. Can you sort of just summarize of when you use Splunk to look for bad stuff in your network, what are sort of your top 3 things to look for?
Yeah, so when trying to determine, there's so much noise that's put off by, all the different systems across the network these days. It's akin to a 747 taking off, and how do you really narrow down through all that noise to look at the indicators that someone bad is inside of your network? So For that, I kind of turned to the Center for Internet Security's critical security controls to kind of see, once these controls are implemented, like application whitelisting, what are some things that we could look for that would kind of cue us off to someone who's malicious inside of our environment. So, probably my top two from that are listening to application whitelisting. So if someone tries to execute an application and that application is blocked, how soon do we know about that, and are we watching for those? The other one that's very interesting to me is watching for DHCP requests, so that we know the moment that a new piece of equipment is plugged into the network, and if that is something we're expecting or not expecting, then we can act accordingly.
Now, Splunk, of course, is a pretty expensive and capable piece of commercial software. Have you looked at all how some of this is sort of applicable to open source software? If you don't have the money, the cash to put out to buy a commercial solution, anything you can recommend that you played with that could do some of this open source?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think originally I was debating between using Splunk and Logstash for this research paper. I went with Splunk from the perspective of, if you focus on only passing really pertinent information into Splunk, then it becomes a much more affordable prospect. I think using Splunk's universal forwarders, you can say, I want this piece of log data, not that piece of log data. And so you can kind of pre-filter out a lot of the noise before you pass it into Splunk. But if you are going all in and kind of just passing all your logs, Logstash seemed to be a much more affordable option.
Now, looking at sort of a multi-operating system environment, do you find that network protocols like, for example, DHCP and such are generic enough where you don't have to write sort of different rules for different operating systems? Any lessons there that you can share?
Yeah, with DHCP, I think the rules were very straightforward, whether it's a Mac connecting or a VoIP phone or Windows PC. You write just one basic rule inside of Splunk, and you get the alerts along with MAC addresses and things like that of the requester. With whitelisting, it becomes a lot more difficult to achieve. I mainly focused in the paper listening for whitelisting on Windows computers.
Now, of course, today, the day we record this, happens to be Microsoft's Patch Tuesday. Do you have to continuously update these whitelisting rules, or do you have any mechanisms there to help you, or any tricks that you can share? How to sort of keep those whitelisting rules up to date?
Yeah, when you're trying, so for the paper, I tried to go the most economical approach, and that was kind of using AppLocker. With AppLocker, it seems to be from a updating your rules perspective and managing it, so you're not investing too many man hours in it. It seems to be the most economical to do a certificate-based whitelisting approach or a directory-based whitelisting approach, assuming that your directories are locked down to administrative users only. If you're using, a more commercial tool out there like Bit9, then those lists can kind of be updated for you. But yeah, with AppLocker, the approach that I kind of took in the paper was more directory or certificate-based.
Now, of course, one of the reasons often put forward sort of for this threat hunting approach and such is that it can take an awful long time to discover that someone is actually already in your network if you're not really looking for it. In your experience, these approaches, have they sort of significantly cut down the time that it takes you to sort of find a compromised system?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think so.